uppercut, try to hit me in the gut, thinking that I won't react. You whispering my name, thinking I won't be the same. Turn fiction into fact. See what you didn't know, bruises that I'll never show, slipping on your every jab. So tighten up your fist, step into the ring with this. I hope your mama's got your back. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 oh. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 oh. Just 'cause I took a break, you're making a huge mistake, thinking you can take the throne. Look at you trembling, step into the lion's den. Bet you wish you stayed at home, begging for mercy underneath your breath when I ain't even sweating yet. My legend's written in the stone, yeah. Your crying nature in defeat is now your only friend. Even your mama's gotta know. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 oh. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 First round, fifth round, final round. Oh, 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 yeah. First round, fifth round, final round. No, 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 no. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 oh. You didn't bust. Oh, oh, oh,
Hi, this is Penn. Penn Jillette, Penn and Teller. Big guy does magic, smaller guy next to me, he does magic too. He doesn't talk that much. Anyway, I wanted to welcome you to In Time with Nick. And, oh, what's that, Teller? What's that, Teller, what's that? Oh, yeah, yeah, Teller wanted to say welcome to In Time too, but his mic is off, like Nick. Love you all. Peace.
Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter, and with me today is Commander Lance McMillan and Operator Starsky. Yeah, we're still getting background on you, Commander. Gentlemen, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Not bad. How are you?
Doing good, thanks. It's very good to see you, Operator Starsky. It is good to see you alive and well. The last few times I've seen you, you've looked absolutely exhausted. I honestly can't imagine what you've been going through. What is your days looking like right now? You're in Bakhmut, is that right?
Around. So my days look sometimes busy, sometimes not much. Trying to do all I can to get as much content as possible, and together with my team, I'm meeting with journalists here, and also meeting our guys, telling their stories, things like that, basically.
And I want to see if you can think of a story that you think our audience would like to hear. I'd love to hear one, but I'd like to remind everyone too, all super chats go 100%. Everything we get from YouTube goes to the charity of Starsky's choice. He has chosen the 𝐍𝐢𝐻𝐻 Volunteer Organization, which helps and also sends aid directly to Starsky's unit. So it's a great way to help out. There's also a link. If you don't want to do it through Super Chat, you can just do it directly. You'll find a link to that and Starsky's channel right in the description. And I believe Ali is dropping a link to the 𝐍𝐻𝐻's PayPal as well. So those are a couple of ways that you can support. We really appreciate that. Would also like to remind people that on the 28th of August, we are going to have at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Lieutenant General Ben Hodges is going to come on, and we're going to talk to him, actually not about Ukraine. We're going to talk about his life, his experiences, what drove him to become essentially the number 2, one of the top guys at NATO. He was, of course, the Supreme Commander of all NATO ground forces worldwide. He was also the commander of all U.S. forces in Europe. It takes a lot of drive to do that. It takes some sacrifice. We're going to be talking to him about his personal experiences and what he thinks about the military, and also just the place and role of the military in modern society. So we're going to talk to him about that. And then he's back on August 30th, same time, where he is going to be discussing explicitly the war in Ukraine and, more importantly, NATO's role in it. I think we're going to ask Starsky about that today because I've been thinking about that some more, and I think it's really well, we'll get into that anyways. But so with all that said, any stories that you think, Operator Starsky, that you think before we sort of get into the weekly update, any stories that you wanted to talk to us about, anything that stands out in your mind?
The other day, we talked to one of the infantry company commanders. Actually, we interviewed him for our Facebook page, and unfortunately, interview will be in Ukrainian. But we asked him if there is some, let's say, some story about his soldiers that makes him feel proud. And he said, yes, there was a story when several of, let's say, newbies arrived to the positions, and we're talking about infantry. Infantry currently is probably the most dangerous profession at the front lines. Even though, from my experience of recent visiting, artillery positions, there is a big chance that you will not make it to the positions. But as for the infantry, those guys are heroes. And the company commander said those guys arrived to the positions, which is already an achievement because Russians strike all the vehicles, all the personnel that tries to approach positions. And the Russians attempted an offensive, and they were advancing towards their positions in order to take control over this position. And so those guys were there. They were left there without support because neighboring positions on the flanks were already captured. So they could not be evacuated because it would take too much time. Basically, the evacuation vehicle could not make it in time anyways. And he said the last phrase that he heard in the radio was, "This is our land and there's no way to retreat." And those guys fought until the end. They all died in the combat, but nobody retreated. And this is the kind of morale that we have in my brigade.
That is, that's a difficult story, but I appreciate you telling us that. So, thank you. And I think it's, I think I can speak for everyone when I say that the courage of Ukraine in the face of this has been an inspiration. So, thank you for that. So, and we had a question about the Hodges. August 28th and 30th. And we're looking for a guest host. We're going to be having a guest host for at least one of those shows. Operator Starsky is going to be on with us to talk with Hodges. I think that's going to be an absolute delight. I'm looking forward to that. So, all right. So what has the last week looked like for you on the front lines and in general in the war? You're muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So in my location, we have some very, very bad, not bad, but intense combat in the area of Bakhmut, villages around Bakhmut that, let's say, Russians losing ground. We can talk about tactical success in those areas. Slow success because of the minefields, because of the fortifications built by the Russian terrorists, and also, again, as I mentioned, Russian artillery trying to strike all the troops that try to approach their positions. If previously it was hard to just survive the combat, now it's hard to get to the positions alive. And last week, was it last week? Basically, yes, 7 or 8 days ago, I visited our artillery positions, approximately 8, maybe 6 kilometers from the Russian positions. And it was hard to get to those positions, and later the car that was supposed to pick me up, so Russian artillery tried to destroy this car, and it had to evade Russian artillery for the whole night until they were able to pick me up, and until it was safe for them to arrive to our position as well. So it was kind of interesting. And as I said, the progress is slow again because of the fortifications. But from what our artillery, from what our infantrymen say, they say that Russians have very, very bad training and morale, and basically we have a lot of interceptions from our area that confirms that they don't want to fight. They often refuse to go to their positions and die, and things like that. And our infantry also say that they are very, very bad in contact combat. So that's the thing. The only advantage they have at this point is basically fortifications and artillery. And in terms of artillery, they have a big advantage in terms of numbers and in terms of shells. So that's the main thing. As for the global news in Ukraine and outside Ukraine, there were numerous strikes in Crimea, basically Crimea and Berdyansk town. There's quite loud there these days. A lot of bad things. I think it's a bad karma. A lot of bad things happen in Moscow. So as far as I remember, exactly 1 week ago, they had a huge fire in Moscow, and they blamed beer for that because they were claiming that a beer factory was set on fire. And I'm not sure if they add vodka to beer because it burned like freaking
Flammable
hell.
beer.
I haven't.
That's a new thing.
Yeah. Maybe they add some rocket fuel. I'm not sure. I have no idea.
It wouldn't. Well, they've drank brake fluid before in World War II. So I don't know how. I mean, there could be anything. It wouldn't surprise me if you had jet fuel, brake fluid, whatever. They'll drink it.
Yeah, perfumes, window cleaners, and things like that. And also, exactly 1 week ago, a Russian illegal bridge in Crimea was also hit. The witnesses reported between 4 and 8 impacts. The Russians were claiming that they basically set the smoke screen. And hiding such a long bridge in smoke is a really, really tough task. And again, I'm not sure how exactly it's supposed to help, maybe because missiles get lost in smoke or something like that. I don't know, get confused, But fact is, it was hit. And also, several days ago, Russians fled from 𝐒𝐨𝐻𝐻. We saw a video showing at least Russian company running like crazy down the road from 𝐒𝐨𝐻𝐻, taken by the Ukrainian defenders. And another news is that in Mariupol, Russian command was toasted due to a precise HIMARS strike. Which is again very good, and what makes me even happier now is that Russian ruble is penetrating bottom. Because I remember just this winter, all kinds of Russians and their supporters, they were bragging about the fact that ruble is so strong. And everybody were telling them that, guys, you will be sorry very, very fast. And very, very soon. And this is exactly what we see because currently the price of $1 is approximately is more than 100 rubles, something like 110, as far as I remember. Gotta check. But it's very good. When bad things happen to Russian terrorists, I literally enjoy. I have my ice cream and coffee, and this is something that makes me happy.
I can imagine. All right, so there's a couple of things I wanted to discuss, but you had mentioned the fortifications. This here is a thermal imaging of an area of mines. What happens is as the soil cools at night, the ground cools faster than many of the plastic components in the mines, so you can end up seeing them for a little while until the temperature evens out. You can see them on thermal imaging. Gentlemen, do either of you have any thoughts on what we're seeing here?
My first thought is that's a lot of mines, and secondly, that may not be all of them in that area.
Well, how can that not be all of them? If oh yes, sorry.
Yeah, because some of them are pretty small, so they might not show up on this. They might be in crevices where you don't have a good picture of it. So there could well be, 20% more mines out there than what you're seeing in that picture. That just gives you an idea of the density of the fields that the Ukrainian forces need to penetrate to even get at the Russian positions. So that's a huge, huge challenge.
And I suppose the smaller, the like cluster kind of mines also might not, which could be sort of scattered. You just fire. It's sort of like they just put them in a cannon basically and spread them out. Those may not be picked up by the thermals.
Yeah, think of those as like being, the tennis, well, not tennis ball cannon, but the t-shirt cannons they use at sporting events.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that, except they'll shoot like 4 or 5 small tuna fish can-sized minelets out of them and deploy them. And they'll be kind of visible. You'll see where they are, but you still have to avoid them. And over time, the grass or dirt will cover them and you won't be able to see them anymore. But they're still active, and they'll stay active for a good long time.
Do we know also, speaking of the hits in Russia, there was a gas station that exploded that, if I understand it, had like 160 casualties or something like that. I have no idea how you get that many casualties at a gas station, but apparently they did. I don't know. Do we have a cause for that? That was what, I think 3 days ago?
Oh, smoking incident, obviously.
Or
there you go. Incident.
Or beer related. Well, to be fair,
my theory is that we're talking about Russians and they like to party in big groups.
It honestly wouldn't surprise. There's that scene in the movie Blade where the guy's smoking a cigarette while filling up the gas tank, and I was just I can totally see Russians just like got 2 cigarettes, one in each hand, a beer, vodka, whatever. It's just like, oh, safety, what's that? All right. So we also know that as of this morning, the U.S. has approved F-16s for Ukraine. How long is it going to take? And we've had this discussion, especially with you, Commander, before about the logistics of the F-16. It requires its own infrastructure in order to maintain, in order to get the parts and keep those up and running, in order to keep it fueled. Obviously, we're not going to have them landing in NATO countries and launching from there. So Ukraine has to be ready to do that. And we have to have pilots who can do it. So realistically, how long, gentlemen, are we looking at? What do we know about the F-16s that are coming in or that have been approved? And how long before we see them fighting?
The 2 nations that have been given authorization to transfer their F-16s are Denmark and the Netherlands. And between the 2 of them, I think it's something like 50 or 60 aircraft. So it's not a huge number. The second question that's really important is the status of training Ukrainian pilots for those aircraft. Now, I understand, at least from the rumor mill, that Ukrainian pilots have been training for transition to the F-16 for some time now, since well before they were actually talking about transferring these aircraft. So they should have some number of pilots ready to man those aircraft in fairly short order. So I think once you get past all the logistical hurdles and get the aircraft transferred, and we have to be honest, it still takes time to do that. I figure you could see operational F-16 squadrons possibly sometime in November. That would be my most optimistic guess.
Captain Starsky, any thoughts on the F-16s?
Yeah, and another question is how many F-16s will those countries give us? Because Ukraine requires at least 48 F-16s. We know that there's 44 F-16s in Denmark and 42 in the Netherlands. So will they be able to cover all, like 100% of our needs in those aircraft or not? It's another question. But hopefully other countries will join them as well.
Yeah, I think both of those countries are replacing entirely their F-16 fleets. I think the Danes are replacing with Eurofighters, and I think the Dutch are doing F-35s, but I'm not positive on those. But they are replacing the full inventory. So that gives you 80 or so aircraft that are potentially available for transfer. The other question is how many of those are actually serviceable.
Yeah, and Eurofighters are sexy.
Well, yes. So the issue is, let's assume that most of those aircraft can be transferred. There'll be a few that probably aren't in good condition, and they'll leave those back. So when we used to do evaluation of aircraft, you had fully mission capable, which meant everything worked on the plane. Mission capable, which meant it was flyable and could perform missions, but there were degradations to the system somehow. And then below that, you had marginal and unserviceable. You didn't fly marginal except for like test flights to make sure it was back in condition. So assuming these older aircraft are in decent condition, if you transfer 48 flyable aircraft to Ukraine, and they're all, when they transfer, in fully mission capable status, just the act of flying them will cause some percentage of them to degrade over time. And that's where the whole maintenance process to keep them flying becomes important. So if you have 48 aircraft transferred, I think you can probably guess that at any given time, 36 roughly will be in fully mission capable status.
Will this be enough to give Ukraine air superiority or parity, at least, in the skies over Ukraine?
I think it will do an excellent job of helping them establish air parity. I don't think it's enough to give them air superiority, let alone air supremacy, but it's a step in the right direction. And I think as more aircraft become available, and we know there are other countries that have promised to send them, and in addition to those aircraft, the Ukrainians get a chance to get more pilots transitioned over, I think that may have an effect on changing the dynamic at the front.
What's the status of the Ukraine grain shipments? As Ukraine is the breadbasket of the world, Russia has been attacking Odessa, trying to stop the shipments. They've threatened to blockade ships coming in and out, and I'm sure there's a number of things to discuss with that. What's the status right now?
Last week, they boarded a Palau flagged. You have to understand, when you say a ship is flagged in Panama or Palau or Bahamas or something, it doesn't mean it's owned by those countries. It means a lot of countries register their ships under what are called flags of convenience, because their regulations and the cost of registering the ship in that country are so much lower than other countries.
Or to get around sanctions, right? They can get around, like, that's part of how Russia.
It's made.
But that's how Russia.
Yeah.
No, not in that case. But Russia does the same thing, right? Russia will have their ships under a different flag to get around. So there's a whole bunch of reasons, legit and non-legit, that you would do that.
Right. And so my understanding is a Palauan registered ship, which I believe was actually owned by Turkey, or the owners are Turkish, tried to transit up to Odessa, and the Russians boarded the ship and searched it and let it continue on its way. But technically, that act of stopping a ship on the high seas and boarding it and searching it constitutes a violation of international law. So Turkey could register a protest. And if this happens often enough, and if, let's say, some Turkish crewman is killed by an overeager Russian Marine, well, then you have potential grounds for asking about Article 5. Hello?
Yep, sorry. It's a, so even though it's a Palau, I mean, if the ship is flagged under Palau, the crew was Turkish. If one of them get injured or killed, do you think Article 5 would still be applicable? And if so, is that going to slow Russia down?
The Turks could ask. I don't think the NATO Council would say yes. If the ship was registered in Turkey, then there's a much better chance that the Council would say yes. But since it's the boarding of a Palauan vessel, which is not a member of NATO, it technically doesn't fall under it. Now, you have a Turkish citizen who, let's say, is injured or killed. That's that tiny crack opening of the door that if somebody were so inclined, they could try to wedge the door open further by claiming an Article 5 violation or something. I don't think it would fly, but you could try that.
So we do have a super sticker. I will get to that in just a minute. Thank you. I try to hold those and a member chat, so we'll do that again. All of this is going to go to the Vatra Volunteer Organization, as per that was Starsky's choice for the charity I'd like it to go to. So U.S. intelligence is saying that Ukraine will not meet one of the offense's main goals, which is to reach the city of Melitopol, which is a very important transit hub. We've talked about that before. I remember also when the Russians seized that. To what is that a honest critique of the offensive? And if so, to what do we owe that? And obviously, again, people have been saying, well, gee, it's been going kind of slow. So what do we owe that? What do we contribute? Sorry. What do we attribute that to? And I'd like to start with Starsky on that.
Of course, the fortifications and minefields. I think that the schemes of those, the plans of those fortifications are broadly available to public. And I think that you had a chance to see them. There's multiple lines of defense built by the Russian fascists. One of the reasons why they were able to do that was because Ukraine had not enough vehicles to start the counteroffensive operation earlier, unfortunately. And currently we have to deal with this factor. So that's one of the main reasons why the counteroffensive is going so slow. Nevertheless, the recent success in 𝐒𝐨𝐻𝐿 caused a lot of panic inside of this community of Russian propagandists. There's a lot of messages in the Russian Telegram channels that in case Ukrainian army manages to go further and capture the village south of 𝐒𝐨𝐻𝐿, this will be a big strategic loss to the Russian troops.
Ender?
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. I think the issue is multifaceted. Why is the offensive not succeeding? I still contend that it's not succeeding. I think it's going a lot slower than people had hoped. But it is making progress. At what cost? That's the question that really can't be answered. Whether the cost is worth it or not. That's something that the Ukrainian General Staff has to make the decision on. The reason it's having such difficulty is, as Starsky noted, a combination of the minefields, the fortifications, the multiple layers of defenses. So as each one's compromised, they have time to pull back to the next and then build a completely new one behind that and just keep repeating that process. So as long as the Ukrainian army has to keep pushing into fortified zones, you're not going to get that kind of rapid movement. It's only when you break through the fortified lines and you get open field running behind it that you see the kind of advances everybody's waiting for. I think your other point is excellent, which is that the materials that were promised, the tanks, the armored personnel carriers, some of the artillery systems and such, have been much slower in arriving than I think most people are aware of. I mean, for example, the U.S. promised 30-some M1 Abrams tanks. They still haven't arrived.
Really?
Yeah. So that's the thing that people don't seem to understand, is when you see or hear something in the news that says, oh yeah, Spain is giving Ukraine 20 Leopard tanks. That's great. How long does it take before those Leopard tanks are actually delivered in Ukrainian hands with trained crew to operate them? And it's not, overnight. It's not the next week. It's a lot longer than that. And
but
the final part of the puzzle, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it's taken longer than people had anticipated, though, and I was going to ask if there's a reason for that, but I will hold on to that question until you finish your thought.
I think the last one, which Starsky alluded to this earlier, but I think is a really significant part of the problem of why the offensive isn't going as well as people want, is he talked about how much Russian artillery there is and how that's keeping them slowed down. Every time they try to reinforce troops at the front, the troops are shelled as they approach. It takes longer to bring up supplies and so forth. The way to deal with that artillery is through counter-battery systems. So we need to give the Ukrainians more artillery, more importantly than that, more ammo. The ammo expenditure rates in the war so far are just way off of everybody's predicted level of ammo expenditures. And I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons learned that's going to come out of this war, is every NATO country is going to look at its ammunition stocks and say, we're short by, 80% of what we really ought to have stockpiled.
Jesus.
That's the way the modern battlefield works. The infantry aren't the ones doing most of the killing. It's the artillery that's doing most of that. And it always has been that way. So if we had been giving the Ukrainians more artillery systems, a lot more ammo, perhaps some counter-battery radars. There are radars that actually will track the inbound artillery shells as they're being fired into your lines and calculate exactly where the enemy's artillery piece is, so you can then fire your own barrage and destroy the artillery piece. If they had more of those, that would make the artillery inequality a lot smaller. So I think that's one of the big failings, in my opinion, of the lack of support for artillery. Artillery is king of the battlefield.
So, Captain Starsky, what do you think? The commander has named a couple of things that he thinks has not been supplied to Ukraine that should be. What, in your view, are the most important pieces of hardware that Ukraine needs and is not getting?
Aviation and artillery shells. Aviation for providing the combat air support for the troops on the ground, which is a default thing in the NATO armies. It's completely it's a doctrine. Okay, and we have to do that without proper air support. And another thing is artillery shells, because as Commander mentioned, I think that a lot of NATO countries will make proper conclusions from what they see, and currently we need a lot of them to combat the Russian artillery, to provide our infantry with proper artillery support, because Russians can. We had cases here at our positions when Russians would fire 152 millimeter shells at single soldiers. Soldiers just moving between positions. It's completely nuts in terms of like all kinds of field manuals. It's freaking not an adequate use of artillery, but there are such cases. They literally fire 152 millimeter shells, and those are like that's a heavy artillery. Okay,
that's 6-inch shell.
At single soldiers.
Yeah, that does seem like. I mean, I would think that they wouldn't have the ammo to keep that up, but I mean, if is that something they can maintain doing that? I'd think they'd be saving their shells for something that they'd need to hit with that, but it seems like a waste of. Am I missing something, Commander? Or
I don't think you are. It does seem wasteful, but at the same time, I think their calculus is that they have a population that's over 3 times larger than Ukraine's. And the casualties are going to be one of the key deciding factors in how things go. So if they can inflict a lot of casualties on the Ukrainians, Ukraine is more hurt by having those casualties inflicted than Russia is comparatively. So that's what I think one of the things they're trying to do is by doing that, shooting a 6-inch gun at an individual soldier, is they're just trying to inflict those casualties. It's that, as I've mentioned before, the brutal calculus of war. And they can go to their friends in North Korea or Iran or China and buy ammo to keep themselves supplied. We know that they're doing that. And those countries have a large stockpile of compatible ammunition because their armies are equipped on the same kind of systems the Russians have. So they're able to do that.
Lieutenant General Ben Hodges.
People must understand. People must understand that Russian mindset is very, very specific. And for example, buying additional shells or making shells using their population and things like that. It's of course it's a big disadvantage for the Russian economy, but on the other hand, if Russian children in schools have like buckwheat porridge, there's nothing bad in switching them to, let's say, cabbage porridge, which is a bit cheaper, and things like that. But there's one big mission is to kill Ukrainian people, murder civilians, kill soldiers. That is much more important for the Russian community. And this is something that they will keep doing unless we kill more of them.
Absolutely.
So Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, who again we're going to be having on the 30th, the 28th and the 30th. That's Monday and Tuesday of not this coming week, but the week after. We're going to talk to him. He's been along saying that NATO has been supplying Ukraine so that they can survive, not so they can win. And the suggestion, I find it interesting because it never crossed my mind to, we're getting background noise. I think it's from Commander. The suggestion has been, thank you. The suggestion has been that that sort of a lack of will, but we're starting to hear that it may be something more than that. So I'd like to talk about the Chief of Staff for NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg said, quote, "I think that a solution could be for Ukraine to give up territory to Russia and get NATO membership in return." Now, the obvious issues with such a deal like that aside, there's been suggestions now that actually that has been Biden's plan and NATO's plan for some time, to allow Putin to walk away with something so that he can go back and say to his people that he's gotten something, and to offer Ukraine NATO membership for that. And that, in fact, that's one of the reasons that the U.S. has been delaying, is that while we support Ukraine, that support has been more for its survival than for its victory, fearing, obviously, that Russia may go nuclear or any of those things. Do you think that there's any truth to that? And if not, well, either whether there is or isn't, what can be done to convince NATO and or perhaps just NATO states like Poland to help more, to give Ukraine what it needs, not to survive, but to win? And I guess I'll start with Starsky on this one again, please.
Ukraine will not survive if it doesn't win this war. That's obvious, because it's what we receive right now is enough to survive for a while. We cannot do this together. We cannot continue fighting for like 100 years. We do lose soldiers, and eventually we will run into we will face a big problem, because soldiers are getting tired, especially keeps on fighting since the beginning of 2022. I know that Russians don't have this problem because they can just mobilize another 200, 300,000 men and send them to Ukraine into a meat grinder, and eventually mobilize more and more. It's obvious. Ukrainians cannot do that because we don't have so many people currently. There's 30 million Ukrainians stationed here in our, on the Ukrainian territory, maybe less. So it will be enough to survive for a while, and then we will die. If we don't win, we will basically fail to survive. So this plan sucks, in my opinion. 100% not work.
Commander?
Absolutely. No, I think he's hit it right on the head. I won't go so far as to say this was the plan all along. I don't think there was a plan all along. I think this caught U.S. and NATO by surprise, and they wanted to, start by doing something. But I think, like a lot of people in the West, everybody figured, well, Ukraine will just be overrun in a week when the war started. And when it didn't happen, then everybody's going, oh, well, maybe we should help them. I know, let's send them this. And you see that each one of these tiny increments of support we're giving is definitely having an effect, but it's incrementalism, and incrementalism is not a way to win a war. And I think at some point, people at the top started saying, okay, how do we get out of this? Because we don't want to get caught up either in World War III or in a conflict that just stretches on indefinitely. So how do we get out of it? So maybe, I'm not saying it happened, but maybe at some point the higher ups start saying, okay, we give Ukraine enough to survive, and we wait until Ukraine is willing to modify its demands, and we give them enough to bleed the Russians white so the Russians are willing to concede certain things, and then maybe we can force an end to the conflict. That could be what's going on. I hope to God it isn't. I think that's cynical and cruel beyond words, but, being the cynic that I am, yeah, there's definitely a possibility it is. And I think that's awful.
As a graduate of the Naval War College, as someone who studied the history of war, would you consider that something along the lines of appeasement, or is that something else in your view?
I've likened this to the situation Czechoslovakia was in 1938, the famous Czech crisis that led to the Munich Accords. And in that situation, the Western powers said, oh, yes, we will guarantee Czechoslovakia safety, providing they surrender the Sudetenland to the Germans, which was Hitler's opening demand. Except what nobody bothered to think about was, when you surrender the Sudetenland, you're basically giving up the entire defensible border region, the mountains that surround Czechoslovakia, which means there's no way to stop the Germans from taking the country. And secondly, a promise is only as good as the air that comes out of the guy's mouth when he's speaking it. And that's basically what it was. It was empty promises just so that everybody hoped the problem would go away. I don't think Ukraine is exactly a Czech crisis, but I also think it's not Poland in 1939. When Poland was invaded, the Allies declared war on Germany. They didn't do much after that initially, but that was what they did. And I think in this case, honestly, given the situation we were in with Ukraine, with the Budapest Accords, the moment the Russians crossed the border in force, rather than the little green man or the quiet annexation of Crimea, when they tried to invade, we should have said the Budapest Accords afford us not just the opportunity, but are the required response from us to intervene on behalf of Ukraine. And we didn't do that. And I think that was a colossal moral failing.
Operator Starsky, anything to add on that? We've talked about the Budapest Accords before, and I'd asked you a while back, and most Americans have no idea what the Budapest Accords are. I assume most Ukrainians have a pretty good idea since they're very relevant to what's been going on. And we haven't talked about it. The U.S. is helping some, so I imagine it's difficult to talk about. But it seems to me that there has been a failing of a number of countries, the U.S. included, in their obligations to the Budapest Accords, which were written such that, what are your thoughts, and what are the thoughts of the average Ukrainian in regards to the Budapest Accords?
The Budapest Accords were written in a way that any conflict, and by the way, Russia was one of the countries that guaranteed security to Ukraine. So they were written in a way so any conflict should be resolved through UN Security Council, which doesn't freaking work. So that's one of the problems. We should either reform UNSC or do something, because according to the Budapest Memorandum, there was nothing about military support. Like, there were literally no details. It just says you are guaranteed security and safety. Be happy. Enjoy.
Your security and safety, it wasn't concessions. It wasn't, I forget what the word used, but it's a word that can be.
Let's stop for a moment and posit a completely improbable scenario. But you tell me, what if NATO had attacked Ukraine? Do you think the Russians would not have immediately intervened in force? I don't think there would have been a second's hesitation.
Yeah, could be. On the other hand, Russia never fights against nuclear countries.
Yeah, I mean, but I still think that they would have used that as the pretext for, we're coming to help Ukraine.
Yeah. They would, and take land that way. By the way, because once they're in to help you, quote, help Ukraine, you're never getting them out. But I like what you said earlier, and I had never considered that, which is it was also a missed opportunity. If the goal of NATO here, in sort of one of the more cynical perspectives, if the goal, let's drop any goal of helping a country that's westernizing, helping an ally, helping, just doing the right thing. We'll drop all that for a minute. If the goal is just to make life difficult for Russia and or to simply defeat Russia, the reality is, if we had just said, well, wait a minute, we've got these accords, we're required to go in, and just went in, that might have been far more effective. And if we had committed full there, then they would be the ones facing the choice of, well, how much can we actually keep going forward without triggering NATO and or a nuclear response, instead of us on our heels worried about them. Is that roughly your argument?
Yeah, to an extent.
I think that's, I hadn't considered that. All right, so we've got, let's see, 5 Swiss francs from 𝐒𝐨𝐻𝐿𝐴. Thank you for that. We really appreciate it. Again, that's going to be going to the 𝐶h𝐺𝐻 Volunteer Organization. We have a couple of new members. Writer's Eye, thank you guys so much for your support. We really help. We get demonetized quite a bit, as most of you know. We try to deal with adult subjects in an adult way, which is something YouTube strongly discourages. So, your support really does help us. More, I know it's. Take a look at the top 10 YouTube channels that make the most money. Somebody made 14 million with unboxing videos. Dear friggin' Lord, so I've got a 12-year-old daughter, and I finally decided that rather than me trying to do serious shows covering serious topics, it's time she started earning a living. We're going to just have her do unboxing videos. We'll be millionaires, and then we can just do whatever we want. She's more likely to make money on YouTube than I am. All right, so but thank you all for your support. We really do appreciate it, and it really does help. We've also got, if you want to become a patron, there are many ways to support the show. It really does help. We sometimes we show graphic footage. We talk about things that get us demonetized quite regularly. So we really rely on you guys. So thank you for that. And Hill, $20, 𝐶𝐿Ava Ukraine. Thank you very much for that. And thanks for being you from Noel Weiland, $20. Thank you guys once again. We really, really appreciate that support. So any final thoughts as we start to wrap this up? I'll start with you, Captain Starsky.
Well, as always, I would like to say big thanks for supporting Ukraine, because this is the right thing to do, in my opinion. And of course, Ukrainian people, if we survive this battle, we will never forget your help. And we will always be grateful for this. So thank you so much.
Well, certainly I think on behalf of In Time and everyone associated with the show, it is rare you get an opportunity to do the right thing in such a clear way. So anything we can do to amplify the discussion of what's going on in Ukraine, we do, and we appreciate you coming here to help us with that. And I think it's a genuine privilege to be in a position to do that. So thank you, sir. Commander, any final thoughts before we go?
Yeah, something that you and I talked about before we actually went live. A organization, and I can't remember honestly which one it was, but I think it may have been like International Red Cross or the UN Commission for Human Rights or something, issued earlier this week a statement that they estimated the total Ukrainian casualties in the war thus far, combined across military and civilian deaths and wounds, amount to about 500,000 people. If you put that in context with the complete size of the population of Ukraine, that's roughly 1% of the entire population of this country. That, at any other time in history, would be seen as a huge, colossal tragedy, and everybody would be rushing to do something to help. And I find it reprehensible that at this moment we're actually making noises about, well, maybe we don't want to be involved in this anymore, kind of thing. It's so infuriating.
I'm going to piggyback off of that for a second. Oh dear God, I was a political operative for a while, and worked on the Obama campaign. Worked on every campaign on one level or another since. Oh my God, I wanted to say Kerry, but no, since Al Gore. And despite all that, I rarely vote. I vote, but it's my wife is always like nudging me to do it, and I tried to find ways. Oh, Commander, I think that's you. We're getting a lot of
the dogs are running around.
So, and I remember, oh dear Lord, for the Obama campaign, I really didn't want to vote. That there was just something about it I didn't, and I was the head of the field director for Connecticut was just like, okay, you don't have a choice because you can't be on the Obama campaign and not vote. So please believe me when I tell you I completely get it, and there's something about it that I really rubs me the wrong way, despite the fact I'm always advocating for political candidates. I will say this. If the Republicans win, and this is for every win that they get in the United States, in the House, in the Senate, and God forbid the presidency of the United States, these are going to be people that are going to be voting against continuing to support Ukraine. And I don't usually believe in being a single issue voter. There are a lot of issues that all of us are concerned about. But this election...
Let's be honest.
Yes,
there's good suspicion that about half of them are in the pockets of Russia.
More than good suspicion. There's even more coming out about what's his name, the aluminum guy, Starsky, whatever his name is, and his payoffs to Mitch McConnell by buying aluminum plants and running them in Mitch McConnell's own district. What would have been a violation of sanctions, except an exception was put in by a particular senator so that this could be done. That senator that made the exception for the aluminum plants in Kentucky was, of course, Mitch McConnell. So
I find it interesting that the anti-communists, the party of McCarthy, have turned into the biggest allies in this country for Russia today.
That is, and it's very hard to, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Russians aren't that bad. Oh, yeah. Have you any fucking clue what it's been like in the U.S. for the, and we're doing a show, we're going to do I think a scripted show on sort of the history of Russian relations and interference since basically the Cuban Missile Crisis till now. And it's really extraordinarily bad. And Ukraine is suffering Ukraine knows full well what Russia is capable of, and the U.S. used to have a pretty good idea up until recently. And at any rate, this election is going to matter more than most, and it's going to matter very much for the people of Ukraine. So if this is a topic that you're interested in, I would advise a couple of things. First of all, get to know where your congressmen stand on the issue and vote based on that, and realize that if we can get people who support Ukraine into Congress. It makes it easier for Biden. It makes it easier for everybody to continue to support Ukraine. Ukraine can't hold out forever, as Starsky said. Support will not last forever, but you can make it last longer, and you can help based on how you vote. The U.S., the average citizen in the U.S. is uniquely positioned to be able to help. You want to help? I appreciate the super chats. I appreciate the support here. Appreciate you guys calling out on Operator Starsky and giving him a shout out, giving me a shout out. More important than all of that, vote for people who will support Ukraine. That's one of the biggest things you can do, and it costs you nothing but a little time. So, having said all that, gentlemen, thank you very much. We did get a $50 super chat, Silver Earth, We Heart Ukraine, and 6 euros from Gaming with Robin. So, thank you so much. Yeah, there are other ways donating to anyone who's sending armor and weapons to Ukraine. Somebody pointed this out in the live chat. That's a huge help too. So there's a lot of ways, but whereas the election is coming up and the Republicans have made it crystal clear that they do not wish to see Ukraine be supported. Commander, do you think it's fair to say that basically one of Putin's strategies is to just wait out the clock and hope that Trump so, I mean...
Oh, absolutely. I think that at this point, that's almost their only viable strategy, is to try to influence particularly the U.S., but also any elections going on throughout the Western Bloc, and to put autocrats into power, because they know the autocrats will not want to get involved with what's going on, not want to support Ukraine. They favor an oligarchy on the other side.
An oligarchy that pays them well in many cases. Well, at least that's
exactly.
what Mitch McConnell tells me.
It's the rich boys club. They want to be friends with each other. They don't care about actual people.
Al, and if you're watching the show, you know we're an educational program, and there's nothing you can do better than to educate yourself. Educate yourself on who the candidates are, and if you have the time, not only vote, but volunteer for those candidates. And if they support Ukraine, and if they know that by supporting Ukraine, they can get your vote and the vote of people you can bring with you, that's going to help. Gentlemen, thank you both so much for coming. As I said before, Lieutenant General. Thank
Ben
you.
Hodges.
You know what? Do you want to host it? No, never mind. I'm not gonna
No,
go there. Okay.
I'm just trying to coach you through your lines.
Yeah, thank you. Lieutenant General Ben Hodges will be on August 28th and August 30th. We're going to have him twice in a row, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. First show, we're going to be talking about his personal life, his experiences, what he learned going through the military, what he's learned about the military in general, and what he has done to accomplish the things that he has. That will be on the August 28th. That's a Monday. Wednesday, August 30th, we are going to be talking about NATO commitment to Ukraine, what can be done to strengthen that commitment, what NATO needs to do, and how NATO can ensure that Ukraine not only survives, but actually fully wins this war, and why that is so important. That will be General Ben Hodges on August 30th. Hope you guys will join us, and with any luck, we will have co-host Operator Starsky with us, helping us out and talking with General Hodges. Looking forward to that. Gentlemen, once again, thank you all very much. Thank you to the live chat. Come join us on the Discord if you want to learn more about our shows. We've also got a Ukraine channel where we've been following everything that's been going on in Ukraine, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. Have a good night.